Hello, I'm Jo Francis. I'm Coram Bath's manager for our publications department, and I'm interviewing Elaine Dibben today. She is formerly Coram Bath's adoption consultant. Now she is an independent consultant. Elaine recently revised and updated our book, Effective Adoption Panels. So, hello, Elaine.
Good morning, Jo. Lovely to be talking to you.
So, congratulations on the new edition. I know it was a lot of work. What do you think is the enduring appeal here? It just keeps going.
I think because it is the only book really that focuses completely on adoption panels, and I think it has a variety of readers really. So I think obviously a lot of agencies will automatically buy the book for any new panel members, and very much kind of encourage panel members to read it, not just to kind of read it cover to cover, but to to dip into it. And when there's cases coming to panel that they're maybe not so familiar with, then that gives them an opportunity to have a look at something that will sort of break it down for them into little bits a bit. So it's certainly something that's very much kind of used to inform panel members. But I think, to be honest, adoption workers as well, very much see it as their Bible really to kind of what needs to happen in relation to adoption panel work.
The book is primarily aimed at panel members, as you say, to provide them with the information they need to fulfill their roles properly, and to make sure, of course, that they're following the law and regulations. But it is helpful for social workers as well, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, particularly obviously for panel advisors, because they're in that key role really of organising panels, of organising the work that comes to panels, and of liaising with colleagues in sort of social work teams and adoption teams, and helping them to understand kind of what the purpose of panel is, and what the expectations are in terms of the work that needs to be provided. So I think panel advisors would certainly very much see it as a go-to publication for them themselves, as well as wanting to provide it for their panel members. But I mean, I think we know that there's a significant turnover in terms of staff that are involved with adoption work, either children's social workers or new adoption social workers. So I think there will always be people coming into this area of work that are perhaps less familiar with the work of panels, not quite so sure really about what their purpose is, and so I think the book helps demystify some of that really, and certainly sort of steers people in sort of thinking about the things that need to be considered, either when they're presenting at panels or whether they're sitting on panels and considering some of the work that comes.
I mean, demystifying, I can really imagine it must be quite intimidating when you first have to go to a panel and be involved in a panel.
Well, I think for new panel members, I mean, obviously we, have a variety of people who sit on panels, but, we're always trying to bring in people who are new to panels, who perhaps have their own personal experience of adopting or of being adopted themselves.
Of course.
Or they may come from, other professions. So they may have been in education or in health. So, a panel as a concept, in the way that we operate adoption and fostering panels is very different to anything else they might have been involved in, really. And I think for people for whom adoption is also a personal story, it's also kind of recognising that there will often be triggers for them and things that, that they'll be very aware of, and be sort of viewing in a different way to other people who sit on the panel.
Of course. What would you say then are the sort of most important things to remember if you are part of a panel?
I think for me, it's really important that everybody who sits as a panel member recognises and feels that their contribution is as important as everybody else's. So I think you'll often hear people who are, perhaps adopters or have been adopted themselves, who sort of say, oh, but I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional. And it's like, well, no, and that's good, because we've got professionals who are sitting on the panel here, and they obviously bring their own expertise and experience and understanding, and they've got a wealth of knowledge of cases that have been before and ones that will come. But I think those personal experiences for people really help to bring something quite unique to panels. So someone who's who knows what it's like to be trying to understand their adoption story, someone who knows what it's like to be helping children who struggling with the after effects of trauma and abuse, those people I think can can bring a very different understanding and can often kind of ask questions that challenge adopters to sort of not just give the pat answer really, but to sort of really think about and connect with the things that we're talking about. So I think that the contribution of every single panel member, should be absolutely valued. There'll be different contributions, but they nevertheless kind of contribute to the whole and the overall value of a panel and the way in which it looks at information and then, just ensures really that all of the issues have been covered.
No, I can see that would be really important input for sure. I mean, it's a very human story, really, isn't it? Going to panel, it's not just about, as you say, the professional view. But of course, talking about the professional view, I mean, many social workers will have to attend panel. So what would the most important things be to remember if you are attending a panel as a social worker?
Well, I think it's quite funny. I think, social workers will sometimes say that coming to an adoption panel is worse than going to court.
Wow. Which
I find a little bit difficult to understand, but because certainly none of us are wearing wigs. And so I think for social workers, I mean, I guess the issue for social workers is that they are aware that panel is effectively a quality assurance mechanism for checking the work that they've done. So that there is an element of social workers feeling that, that their work is being scrutinised. And if there are questions that panel are asking, they may feel that their work is being challenged really. And, but I think it's recognising that actually, and again, going back to the answer to the previous question really, that when you're looking at a body of people who all bring very different knowledge and experience, that people might just see things in a different way. So, social workers will have presented information, but, other panel members will want to kind of sometimes understand, well, what was behind that decision making? What made you think that this was a good match for this child? What were the things that you saw in these adopters that you thought would make this a good match to the child? If you've had quite some adopters who've had quite a challenging kind of issue as part of the assessment, how has the social worker analysed that for themselves, and how is the social worker being reassured that this is something that these adopters have worked their way through and that actually will be an advantage rather than a vulnerability in their role as an adoptive parent going forward. So I think it's for social workers to sort of recognise that panel's playing a really important role here. And actually, we're working together as a team to make sure that the people who are suitable to be adopters are approved, and to make sure that, most importantly, that children are being then placed with families who can be their forever families.
No, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I can see that although it might well be a little scary, a little nerve-wracking for a social worker, I mean, everyone is working towards the same aim, aren't they?
And I think certainly panels will always try to acknowledge the really good work that social workers have done, and that behind every report there's a lot of work that's already been done, either in terms of an assessment or in thinking about kind of what's going to come through as a good match for a child. So I think that social workers should be open to questions that panel members might have, but I mean, usually I think panel members will also want to be really acknowledging the kind of the work that's gone into things before it comes to the panel.
Yes, of course. And the last time I think this book was initially, it was 2016 was the previous edition, and now of course we are 2022. So obviously we've all lived through a lot since then. So what were some of the things that got updated in this edition? What sort of things have changed in the world of panels?
Well, obviously the most obvious change has really been the impact of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And prior to 2020, if you talked about holding a virtual panel, I think most people would have gone, oh, that's not a very good idea, really. It's much better to have panels face to face, so I think we generally weren't recommending that people should attempt virtual panels, really. And then all of a sudden we all had to. And I think it was absolutely remarkable how quickly agencies were able to kind of drag their kind of IT departments and all sorts of other people into setting up and running virtual panels. It really did happen incredibly quickly, and with a huge amount of goodwill on everybody's part, really. So I think, while I was still working at Core and Bath at that time, and, we tried quite quickly to pull together some sort of tips and some good practice for agencies that were operating virtual panels. And so, it was obvious when we were going to be updating effective panels that we needed to include and recognise the fact that panels certainly have been held virtually for the last 2 years. Yeah. I think some agencies are resolved to continue holding them virtually. Others are still considering why they might hold some kind of hybrid model, and some are very keen to get back to being face-to-face again. So I think that sort of we recognise that going forward, there may be slightly different models in the way how that people are running their panels now, but it felt very important to acknowledge that in effective panels and to recognise that there are different things that need to be thought about where panels are being run virtually. So I took some of that guidance that we'd first produced probably back in 2020 and have continued to kind of update over time. I've really kind of included into that lots of discussions that I've had in meetings with other panel chairs and panel advisors and talking with people about how they do things and what works best. And so all of that we've tried to kind of incorporate now into this new volume of effective panels. So that was the biggest thing, really. And then I guess, you have to do a lot of updating, nothing, in terms of legislation, nothing has changed really over the last 6 years, but practice has changed hugely. So, we've got new models from Beth Neal in thinking about how we support and encourage contact between children and their birth families, and trying to, and I think the pandemic has really enabled us to perhaps be a bit more creative about how we do non-direct contact, as well as, I think Beth certainly encouraging people to think a bit more widely really about whether some direct contact might be feasible. So I think we've tried to feature some of that research and some of the thinking behind that in the book. The other kind of piece of research that came out of the UEA was the work on transitions in terms of children moving into adoptive placement. So again, try to reflect a bit about that, and and just signposting people to where they can find out more about those things if that's something that interests them really. I suppose the other thing is just recognising that the world itself has changed quite a lot. So I think, in the book we still talked about, whether people were married or not. We still talked about sort of same-sex couples as if that was still something that was quite new. Well, I think, in reality now, adoption panels will be considering applications from LGBTQI applicants. We're certainly seeing, more trans applicants coming forward for adoption. And so we've really tried to sort of update some of the terminology in the book and some of the thinking really that panels need to do when they're looking at applications, particularly if perhaps they're not applications that they've kind of necessarily looked at in the past. So just, again, sort of signposting them some other things to read and just helping people to think some of those things through.
Yeah. I mean, that's clearly all of those points are very valuable, and it's important to have something authoritative in the form of this book that people can trust.
Well, I think the thing is with anything that we produce at Core and Bath, it's never just one person's view. As I say, I mean, although I've been instrumental in doing the updating of the book, it's as a result of talking with a lot of colleagues, it's as a result of reading a lot of information. So, hopefully what we feel that what we're kind of suggesting to people is what should be seen as good practice in whatever area we're writing about, really.
Yeah.
The other thing that we did do, and this was to bring it in line with the Effective Fostering Panels book, was updated all of those pro forma templates that we give people. So I did some joint work with Sarah, thinking about adoption panel member appraisals, and so the work that we'd already done around that in terms of fostering panel members, we've kind of translated that across to think about how we can be a bit more creative in the way that we appraise panel members for adoption panels. And we've also, I think, issued a number of templates to help agency decision makers ensure that they cover all the things that they need to do as part of their decision-making role, and that kind of incorporates the guidance from statutory adoption guidance and also more recent case law. So, we certainly tried to kind of update some of those things. And I know that those pro formas are all available for people to buy separately and then adapt and make their own, aren't they?
They are, yes. We sell those as a kind of an electronic package. And I know, I mean, it's a really rich resource. There's an awful lot of pro forma forms and letters and that sort of thing and other documents. And it must make work life a lot easier for people involved in the administration of panels to be able to buy those and then use them as they wish.
Well, I think the important bit really is it will make sure that they don't miss anything off. And I think that we've seen that in the past, perhaps with things that go to the IRM. That when people decide to just write their own. They inevitably just miss out bits that actually are supposed to be there. So I think, we're not saying that people can't adjust and amend the templates as they'd like to, but what we are saying is at least you'll know that you've got everything in there that you need to have.
Yeah, I mean, that's very reassuring, I would imagine. And I mean, we know that many agencies buy this book, obviously, it's a bestseller, and they ensure that all of their panel members have a copy. So what do you feel is the importance for agencies of having this book, of having this guidance?
I think the main thing probably is to know that you've provided panel members with the information that they need. I mean, and that's that there's obviously a requirement when you recruit a new panel member, then that they should have an induction package. And the agency is responsible really for ensuring that they have the information that they need to do their role. Well, if agencies try to replicate what we've got in effective adoption panels, that would be an enormous piece of work. And as it is, all they need to do is buy this book and say, here's your copy of effective adoption panels, dip into it, use it when you need to. And I have to say that, I've done panel member appraisals sometimes, and a panel member will say, one of the things I'm not too sure about is this, and we'll say, have you looked in your effective adoption panel?
page 30, away you go.
Yes, that's up on my shelf at the moment. So, I think it certainly saves the agencies themselves from having to do an awful lot of work.
Oh, and I'm sure every agency could definitely do with saving that time for sure. I mean, of course, Coram Bath does do other things for panels. This book isn't the only thing that we do, things for certain types of panel role. I know that we run a number of practice forums and we do a range of training courses. And I know that you have been involved with these over the years when you were working for Coram Bath. I mean, what was that like? Did people engage with those, the forums and the training? Was it
the group for adoption panel chairs has always been one of probably the most valued groups that Coram Bath ran, because independent panel chairs are, as it says, independent. They're not working with other people in the same way. And so that opportunity just to meet with other panel chairs, to sort of share some of the challenges, some of the dilemmas, get some advice, has always been really welcomed by chairs. And I think, again, the pandemic, as terrible as it's been, has opened up those opportunities. So, this used to be a small group that met in the London office, and now it's an online group. And so, we have panel chairs who are attending from all parts of the country. And I'm not working at Coram Bath anymore, but I still attend that group as an adoption panel chair, and I still really value it. So, I think that's definitely one group that's very much appreciated. And then the other one was a group that we actually started running probably in about beginning of 2020, I think. So it started off face-to-face and then very quickly went virtual. And that's the one for panel advisors, who again are in a very unique role and have really appreciated having that opportunity to sort of share practice and share dilemmas and discuss issues with other panel advisors. So that's run for both adoption and fostering panel advisors. But there are so many parallels really in terms of how panels themselves run that actually kind of adds to the richness of the discussions very often. So I think that's another very popular forum that's continuing to run. And then I guess that, the sort of panel roles specific training. So there are training events for panel chairs and vice chairs. And, people are often coming new into that role and need that opportunity to, make sure that they know about the legislation and, what's expected of them, but also just, again, to sort of talk about some of those sort of challenges and dilemmas that you have when you're managing a group of people, really. There's another training course, which I've run in the past, for panel administrators, who are another group of people who, without whom panels couldn't possibly operate, and yet who are often operating in isolation, really. And so they're another group who've really enjoyed just being able to come together with other people doing the same role and sort of share some of the ways in which their panels operate and some of the things that they encounter. So that's always been a really enjoyable training course to run, actually.
Oh, it must be lovely for these people to get together, to be able to network, and yeah.
No, and certainly some of them will, they'll exchange contact details and maybe kind of keep a few links going afterwards. So that's all to the good, really.
Well, I'm sure if anyone is interested in any of that, then on our website there'll be plenty of details of the forums and indeed the training.
Absolutely.
Well, Elaine, thank you so much for talking to me. That was fascinating. And hopefully it's inspired people to have a think about going and looking up the book, which is also on our website, if they're not already familiar with it. And anything further to say?
I suppose the only thing to say, actually, is that we won't be planning another edition for quite a number of years, Joe, I'm sure. But,
I think, yeah.
There'll always be queries that come in over the years from people, and that's some of the things that have found their way into the book this time, where someone sort of said to me, have you got anything in, effective panels about, the business meetings that we have between sort of chairs and agency managers? And of course we didn't. Well, now we do, because that was as a result of someone saying, well, it'd be helpful to have that, really. So, I think, over time, if there are other things that come up that people feel that they would like to see in the book next time, then obviously let us know through one of those forums and it will find its way there next time.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.